and welcome to the How Not to Screw Up Your Kids podcast, the bucket emptying episodes. I'm your host, Dr Maryhan, psychologist and parenting expert. So pour yourself a cuppa, find a comfy seat and enjoy the conversation. This episode, I want to kind of share a bucket emptying resource. It's a resource that I created genuinely off the cuff in a moment. It was a school holidays. My children were arguing and also just doing that usual sort of like, oh gosh, do we have to do this? So I created this literally there and then. I always carried a notebook. I think I'm, as a control enthusiast, I always had a notebook and a pen just in case, so that they could draw or anything, those sorts of things. And I created this resource, which I have used time and time again, not just because I wanted to use it, but because quite genuinely my children asked if we could do this. So I'm hoping this episode is timed around a school holiday, and so that you will find it helpful. If not, then save it for one of those. I used to use this particular resource. Generally, I found it helpful in school holidays because you can use them at the weekend as well, but I think I found it always really helpful for my children in the school holidays because it's often a time that our children can't necessarily always do what they want to do. You have to take them with you when you're doing the food shopping, or when they've got to try on new school shoes, or they've got to go to the dentist, or whatever that might be. So let me talk you through what it is. I called it cheerful treats and grumble chores. And in essence, my children never did sort of reward charts and stickers. They were just never bought into it. It wasn't something they wanted. And it just never seemed to work in terms of motivating them. But cheerful treats and grumble chores worked a treat because it only lasts one day. And the idea of it, the kind of overarching idea is fundamentally there is a treat that they are working towards by the end of the day. Now, I have personally found what is the most motivating in terms of a treat for my children, and I genuinely think probably for most children, is time with us. But time with us in a way that they wouldn't ordinarily get. So for my children, it was always about staying up that bit later and then watching a movie. That was that was a massive treat to them. And we would often then have popcorn, and that they just saw that as just so much more of a treat than saying to them, if you did X, you'll get Y. So the cheerful treat is by the end of the day, that is what we're working towards, is that we're going to stay up late, we're going to watch a movie and we're going to have popcorn. All right, so that's the cheerful treat. What's basically happening during the day is they're basically having a tally of when they do things which are good and cooperative and kind and helpful, is you simply give them a tally, a mark, and that's a cheerful treat. If they complain, are obstructive, they don't do what we ask them to do straight away, or they are rude, then that is one against the grumble chore. And it's really that simple. You have cheerful treats, grumble chores, and you simply tally. Each child has their own. And the idea obviously is that they should be working collectively because they both want to net. The end goal is that they should net out more tallies on the cheerful treats than they get grumble chores. Now because we did it so often and my children loved it so much, we created all sorts of extra rules. But let me just talk you through the basic thing. So for example, we would go to the supermarket and they might get a tally in the cheerful treats if they were then really helpful about going, looking at what was on the shopping list or asking me what was on the shopping list and then going and collecting items and bringing it back. So they helped make the process of doing the shopping much more easy. They would potentially get a cheerful treat if they then helped unpack. And a lot of this is, you can give more than one cheerful treat. If you ask them to unpack and they do it willingly and helpfully, then great, they get one cheerful treat. But maybe if they're kind of lugging in multiple bags and you don't even need to ask them and they're already trying to help and they're being really helpful, you might give them 2 or you might give them 3. So it's almost like working on a sticker chart and a reward chart, but really very much confined to that day. So for example, I remember this happened quite vividly. I took the children to a well-known coffee shop And I had a coffee and they had a biscuit. And my daughter went, thank you so much, Mummy, for taking us out for us to be able to have this. This biscuit is delicious. So it was like, oh, that's off the cuff. She wasn't asked, she just said it. And so I gave her a cheerful treat. And of course, her brother was just like, oh, thank you, Mummy, I'm really appreciative. But there was lots of sort of joking about, you didn't get in there quick enough, your sister did. So it's like a kind of, it's promoting and encouraging them to see ways in which they can really optimize and be as cooperative and helpful as they possibly can. And so that's the idea. And the grumble chore may well be just a lot of whinging and whining and complaining about doing things. Now, with my children, most often they would net out more cheerful treats than grumble chores. It doesn't matter if they have one more cheerful treat than grumble chore. That's all they need in order for that to happen. But what I found is it was really highly motivating them every time I gave them a cheerful treat and used descriptive praise to describe exactly what it was that they did that warranted that cheerful treat. So I'm so impressed with how you were very polite, or how I didn't even need to ask you to help bring things in from the car and unpack from the food shopping. You just did it, and I really appreciate that. And because of that, you're getting 2 cheerful treats. It kind of promotes and encourages, and it just keeps the focus really clear on that day, what they're working towards. And it's that kind of reminder. And usually what happens is they'll work collectively. They'll work together. Now, it did happen once, and only once, where my daughter ended up with more cheerful treats than grumble chores. So she got she got the film, and my son didn't. And on that one occasion, because he had done something particularly problematic, I cannot remember, but I remember at the time it being, pretty big enough to warrant that, he went to bed. And his sister stayed up and had the film. Now, that isn't about being punitive and being unkind. There was a very genuine reason. We had a discussion about it. We explained why it would not be appropriate for him to then get the cheerful treat. And so he then went to bed. So in that one time, it didn't necessarily work out. But there had been other occasions where actually one of them had got so many more cheerful treats that they asked if they could give their sibling some of their cheerful treats to ensure that they both got to stay up to watch a film. So from my experience, it worked out. It was a really collaborative, cooperative thing, but it also kept that emphasis on being cooperative and helpful. And I'm going to describe and praise everything that you do that I love. And that's going to make you feel brilliant. And that keeps us all focused on the one thing that you want, and that's that quality time at the end of the day. So that is my bucket emptying resource, which I hope you find helpful. I think what I probably just caveat with all of this is that don't overuse it. I find with any of these sorts of strategies is that there's a benefit to it being novel, which is why I kept it generally for the school holidays rather than at weekends. Because those extended periods of time where we really are looking for cooperation, where we do have a multitude of things that we need to get done and we want our children to be on board, it makes a big impact, and it then means they're much more likely to want to do it again, and it kind of creates that lovely feeling. So that would be my kind of encouragement. But for those of you who use it, feel free to adapt, modify, do whatever you want with it, but feed back to me. Let me know how you're getting on and using it. And I still, my children are 23 and 20, and we often talk really fondly about the days of the cheerful treats and the grumble chores. It's something that is sort of really embedded in their childhood memories, but in a really fond and lovely way. So I do hope you find that helpful. If you have enjoyed this episode, then I would be so grateful. Really, really grateful. It literally takes a couple of minutes. If you could follow, rate and review this podcast so that others can find us and we can spread the love. So until next time.